I was born and raised in Chandler. My drinking career started when I was 9 years old. I drank because my dad drank. I saw my dad. He was a successful real estate guy, but he drank, and he would drink till he'd pass out on the floor. I was always amazed that my dad was passed out on the floor, and I thought that's what dads did because that's what I was raised with. And I thought that was the way it was until I was about 8 years old, and I went to a friend's house, and I saw this man walking around the house, and I go, who in the hell is the guy walking around the house? And then my friend said, well, that's my dad. I said, why isn't your dad passed out on the floor? Well, my dad doesn't drink. And I swore at that time, I said, I'm not gonna be like my dad. I ended up just like my dad. And me and my brother would hide behind the couch, and we would drink from the bottle that my dad had. And him and my mom would fight because he thought she dumped it out and watered it down, and she thought he drank it and watered it down. And me and my brother were sitting in the back drinking with the booze we had poured out of the bottle, laughing. And that's kind of my introduction. I was about 9 years old when we really started drinking, and my brother's a normie. He drinks and he can put it down. He'll drink 2 beers and he's good. He just didn't have the gene, didn't have the switch. I was drinking all the time. I was shoplifting pints, half pints, going to my friends' houses and drinking their parents' booze. And it kicked in quick because I liked how it made me feel. It made me feel 6 feet tall, bulletproof. I was a fat kid. I weighed, in 7th grade, I weighed 170 pounds. Was too big to play football. My dad wanted me to do sports, so he pushed me into wrestling. I can't say that I liked it. I actually hated it at first, and it sucked. I was horrible at it. And I couldn't blame the booze because I just wasn't very good, but I drank after practice, I drank before school. But I kept doing it because my dad was one of these fathers that was like, oh, God damn it, you're gonna do the sports. And in my 9th grade year, I won a match. I won my first match, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Wasn't cool enough to quit drinking, but it was cool enough to, hey, maybe I need to work a little bit harder. So I practiced harder, and I started to become pretty good at wrestling. I won nationals a couple times, Greco-Roman wrestling. I qualified, 3rd for the Olympic team in 1980 out of high school. But I was drinking. I was drinking all the time, and that was the year that Jimmy Carter boycotted the Olympics, so nobody went, and so I was all bummed out. What am I gonna do? I graduated Chandler High School with a .02 GPA. Not a 2.0, but a .02 GPA. It was more like, get the hell out, we don't want you here anymore. They gave me my degree and got me out. And I joined the military, and I served in the Navy over in San Diego. I drank during boot camp. I drove a truck for the Navy, and I delivered stuff. I delivered boxes of papers, orders, furniture. Decided to drink before work, and I blacked out, and I ended up driving from San Diego to San Francisco in a blackout. I was AWOL for 3 days in a military truck. I woke up in a Ralph's parking lot up in San Francisco. MPs knocked on the window, asked me if I knew where I was. I said, yeah, I'm in San Diego. They said, well, step out of the truck. Ended up getting arrested, being charged with desertion, being charged with being AWOL. Did some time in the brig, got out. They offered me a discharge. I got out. I gave up all my benefits that I had accrued. Did 16 months, so I didn't have a whole lot of time, but and so I ended up coming back home and with an honorable discharge. I came back home, and I married my high school sweetheart. We got married, and I was drinking. She liked to smoke pot, so we started smoking a lot of pot. I was a fan of anything that would get me out of myself, whether it was alcohol or drugs or I would go into stores. There used to be a place here called Smitty's and stores like that where I'd fill a cart up and I'd just walk out the door. I had about $2,000 worth of stuff in the cart, and I got caught, and it was a hell of a life. From about 82 to 90, I have a blackout. I really don't remember a whole lot. And I was married for like 8 years with my ex-wife, and we had 3 kids, 3 beautiful kids. And she got tired of the bullshit. It was a rocky marriage. It wasn't very good, and she ended up cheating on me, and I ended up beating the guy up. I got arrested for domestic violence, and she ended up walking away from me and the kids. So I was responsible for raising these kids. I didn't know how to raise these kids. In 1990, when all this went down, I emptied up my kids' college funds, spent it on cocaine. Got really into cocaine. I spent about $30,000 on coke in about 3 weeks. And I was still working at the aluminum factory at the time, and somebody introduced me to crystal meth and said, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot better, you last longer, whatever. And so I did that, and I was off and running. I started doing meth, a whole lot of meth. Couldn't afford meth. I started robbing drug dealers with my kids in the car. It was a freaking mess. It was horrible. They were like, "Yeah, Daddy's going out. We get to go out." I mean, and it was a mess. So I would take the kids, and I'd be dressed in black, and I'd have a shotgun, and I'd go in, kick the dealer's door in, put a gun in his mouth, and tell him to give me all his dope. Would leave the money, because if I left the money, he wouldn't call the police. But if I robbed him and I took his money, he's going to call police and say, hey, somebody broke into my house and stole his money. But I figured he wasn't going to say anything about the drugs. So I did that for, I don't know, several months. I really went off deep end, and I started cooking meth. I learned how to manufacture meth. And I did it in my kids' bathroom while they were in the house. Horrible stuff, no accidents or injuries. They never really knew what I was doing, but I regret that a lot. In September of '91, I got in a DUI accident. I'd been drinking, never got arrested, never had a DUI. I ran into a lady and almost killed her. T-boned her on Chandler Heights and Alma School Road. Ended up severely injuring her, putting her in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. I lost my license for 30 days, but kept drinking, and then I went to Charter Hospital for 18 days, and then I got discharged because my insurance ran out, and they were like, hey, you're good to go. So I left, and I relapsed on the way home. Yeah, New Year's night, 91, 92. Got another DUI when I ran from the cops. They tried to stop me, I ran. I was driving, and I went down the road, and I turned, and it was a cul-de-sac. So they caught me, and this was before tasers or anything, and so they ordered me out of the car. I didn't get out of the car, and they wanted me out. I got out, and they ordered me on the ground. I said, make me get on the ground. I said, I'll fight y'all, whatever. And my blood level for that one was .283. And I got shot right in the stomach with a beanbag, and I was curled up on the ground like a little girl crying. It hurt so bad. And I got charged with 19 felony charges. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't really care, and I kept drinking. Kept doing meth. I got into heroin at the time, and I was messed up. I was stealing to support. I'd take the kids shoplifting with me, and I wasn't a nice guy. I went through trial. I was trying to work and drinking and trying to work, and I had the kids. Took them to my grandparents, and they decided to take them, and I was out running, doing my deal. I got an offer for a plea bargain for 25 years. I got an offer for a plea bargain for 19 years, 15 years. Finally, I signed a plea bargain for 11 years in prison. I'd signed the plea bargain for 11 years, and the judge looked at the paperwork, and he told me, he said, Mr. Allen, you're a menace to society, but I'm going to cut you a break. I'm going to sentence you to a year in prison with 10 years suspended. And I asked my attorney, I said, what'd he say? And my attorney said, shut the fuck up and sign the papers. I did the circuit of the prisons. I went to Perryville, I went to Florence, I went to, all this stuff. I detoxed in Durango. I was in Durango for about 5.5, 6 weeks, and I was asleep and passed out under the bunks. I'm surprised I survived because shaking, shitting myself, it was a mess. I had some guys that would come by and make sure I drank water, make sure I ate a little bit. But this was back in Arpaio coming on board, and he was like, well, we're gonna make everybody miserable, and they transferred me to 4th Avenue Jail. That's where I first really had a spiritual experience. I was in a cell with another big white guy. He was a big white guy, and he stole all my stuff. He took my mattress, my pillow, my blanket, my lunch, my everything. I'm laying on a metal bunk. When I got sentenced, my ex stepped in and took the kids. We want the kids. So she swiped the kids from my parents. Ended up down in Douglas at a DUI camp down in Douglas. It's a Motel 6 with 8-foot walls with 3 foot of razor wire around it. And there's 5 guys to a room, like a regular motel room. And you got 5 beds. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. The prison in their infinite wisdom, somehow it got into my prison file that I'm a gang member, that I'm a Crip. I'm the farthest thing from a Crip that you'll see. I did about 6.5 months on yard where I didn't get to go off at all. They couldn't work. I worked in the kitchen. It's not enjoyable, and you do what you have to do to survive. Doing time, and I asked my counselor, I said, how do I not come back? I want you to go to this meeting. And I said, okay, I had no clue what he's talking about. 5 people showed up for that meeting. I had to go back and get strip searched and go back on the yard. I'm like, maybe there's something to this. And I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I walked in and my sponsor was at the desk. He didn't know he was my sponsor, but he was at the desk. And I walked in, I said, you have to sponsor me. We talked, he said, why do you want me to sponsor you? And I said, because you're not moving, you're calm, you have some serenity. I want that. And so he said, well, we'll start working on it. And we started the steps, I did the steps, did my amends. I made amends to the lady I put in a wheelchair. She told me, said, just don't do it to somebody else. Gave me the greatest amends in the world. In the meantime, I got out and I had a shit ton of fines to pay. I had 1,000 hours of community service. So I'm like, well, what can I do? And so I ended up talking to my parole officer and probation officers, and I said, hey, can I go back to school? They're like, well, okay, but you still got to pay some fine. Okay, I'll go back to school. So I started at Chandler-Gilbert Community College as a remedial student, taking 0003 reading, 00003 math, 1 + 1, that sort of stuff. And I did okay, and I passed, and I passed, and I passed. And 2 years, I got my associate's degree. Had a job working in the math department as a secretary, answering phones, filing, making tests. I'm like, this is amazing. And so my probation officer's like, what are you gonna do now? And I said, let me go back to school and get a better degree. They let me go back to school. I applied at ASU, and I wanted to be a forest ranger. So I'm walking down across campus, and I see this building over on the west side of the mall, and it was, they were having a barbecue. So I walk over and I go, what's this? And they go, oh, this is School of Social Work. I'm like, School of Social Work, what's that? And he said, well, come in and let us tell you about it. I said, well, hold on, I'm a 7-time felon, I'm still on parole, I don't drive, all this stuff. I don't know if I'll fit in. They go, don't worry about it, Hank, you'll fit right in. So I'm like, cool. So I go in, I sign up for School of Social Work, 2 years, get my bachelor's degree in social work. I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm going to meetings, I'm working with others, I've got service commitments, and mostly I'm not drinking or drugging. My life's getting a little bit better. It's getting a little bit better. I didn't drive for 5 years because of my DUIs and revocations. So I got my license back, and I was working with different populations, working with drug addicts, alcoholics, which I love, worked with sex offenders, rapists, child molesters, perpetrators of domestic violence, which was a lot of hard work. It was really, really hard. I did that for about 6 years. You know, my life has changed 180 degrees. My mom and dad, when I was out using and I'd bring the kids over, they would say, you know what, Hank, we can't have the kid, you know, we can't have you here, but we'll take the kids. And they'd take the kids inside and I'd go do my thing. And my mom would always cry. She would always cry, you know, I want you, oh, blah. And I got to make amends to her. And, you know, I told her, I said, Mom, I'm really sorry for everything that I've done, that I did, that, you know, that you don't know about. This is what I did. And she told me, she said, honey, all I've ever wanted is for you to be happy. And so every time I see my mom now, I'm happy. I go over there, my life's shit that day or whatever, I go over there and I'm happy. And she's happy. Made amends to my dad before he passed. And, you know, he just told me, he said, learn. He said, just, you know, learn. Don't hurt other people. And I'm like, okay. And, you know, he died 5 years ago, and he quit drinking, never got sober through a program, but he quit drinking when he probably turned 72. He died at 84. He'd go to meetings with me every once in a while, and we'd go up to meetings and go to breakfast. And I said, you know what, son, I never realized I was an alcoholic until I tried to stop drinking. And I said, well, we all knew. We all knew, Dad. I made amends to the people I need to make amends to. I lecture my groups that the only way an addict, if we're an addict or an alcoholic, the only way we can be sober is not to drink or drug. Not to drink or drug. Now, if you're a casual drinker who's in treatment because you want to see what goes on behind the walls, that's different. Do you want to learn some life skills and you're here to pick up a few skills about how to be a better person? I'm all for that. But if you're here because drugs or alcohol, we can't put drugs or alcohol in our body. We just can't. I tell people, you know, the easiest way to get clean and sober is stop using. And once we stop using and the steps on the walls quit moving and things quit jitterbugging on the desk, then we can start writing stuff in a notebook. We can start doing our third step, our fourth step, our fifth step, talking to our sponsors, doing our service work, and life will get better. My sister died of this disease. She committed suicide because she could not get sober. She overdosed in 2003, and she overdosed, and she called me and she said, Hank, I died and I went to heaven. I went to heaven, I saw Grandpa, I saw Grandma, I saw these people. It was so beautiful, I didn't want to come back, but they made me come back. This is what she said happened when she overdosed. She was telling me on the phone, and she was like, you know, there was a bright light, and I followed the light, and I said, well, Kathy, you know, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write a book, make some money off this experience, use it towards your recovery, stay sober, whatever. And she didn't want to, would call me and talk for a couple hours about this experience. And finally I got frustrated and I said, Kathy, it was probably the fire department shining a flashlight in your eyes that you saw. Use it to your benefit, get sober. And about 3 weeks later, she committed suicide. Said she forgave me, forgave my mom and dad, forgave my brother, all this stuff, and she committed suicide. People are like, well, did you? I didn't make her commit suicide. I told her what I thought. And she was using that as a reason to stay loaded. My life, my story is no different than anybody else who comes in here and does that. A little bit different, but the end result, we used and we ended up in jail, institutionalized, or we die. It tells us in black and white in the big book. You know, 3 things happen to an alcoholic. We sober up, locked up, or covered up. I've got a pretty good run going right now. You know, like I said, I go to 5 or 6 meetings a week. Mondays are the night that me and my sponsees get together and we read and we break bread and we laugh and we talk. We own our house. I've made amends to my kids. My 2 boys are great. I love my 2 boys to death. Got 3 grandkids by my 2 boys. My daughter, she's decided that she doesn't want to have anything to do with me. She knows how to get a hold of me. The door's always open. I've tried to make contact, and she wants nothing to do with me. And so I can't blame her. I hurt her, made amends to my ex-wife. You know, I told my sponsor when I got sober, I said, I'm the only person that has had a wife that cheated on him. That's what I thought. I said, I'm the only person. I'm not ever going to share this. And she said, you know, my sponsor said, well, you need to go to a meeting and share it. I went to a meeting and I said, hey, my wife cheated on me. That's why I did this and da-da-da-da-da. And I had about 15 guys and 5 or 6 women come and tell me they had the same experience. I was not alone. I was not unique. I was not the only person this ever happened to. And for me, that was huge. That was hugely important that I wasn't alone. And I could do what I needed to do. I made amends to my ex. I went and knocked on her door, and she opened the door, and basically I told her, I said, Melanie, I'm sorry for my part of the marriage. I'm really regretful about what happened in the marriage. What can I do to make it right? And you know, I was probably 4 or 5 years sober, and she told me, said, Hank, don't waste your time, don't waste your words, because you're gonna be drinking again. And I said, well, I'm doing this for me, not you. Turned around, walked off. She's living in a broken down, what I call a meth trailer in West Phoenix. I haven't seen her in probably 22 years, and I got my life. And my life's a lot more chill than what it was. If we do the work, we get the results. For people who are wondering, does it work, does it not work, what works, my plea to anybody out there who's watching or listening or whatever is find you a God you can do business with. A group of drunks, a good orderly direction, a universal spirit, energy force, whatever, and put your faith and trust in that and see if it works. Because we can't do this by ourselves. We cannot. And we have to decide, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I've had sponsees die. I've had people that I know have died. And you know, my dream is that one day I get a phone call from any of the places where I work saying, Hank, you don't need to come in today because everybody's sober. It's not gonna happen, but it's sure a nice pipe dream to have, you know, where I always tell people, you know, being a substance abuse counselor is kind of like being a barber or mortician. You know, you're always gonna be in demand. Life can get better. Don't ever give up.
Detox to Rehab wants to help as many people as possible and do it the right way. Please subscribe, comment, and like our channel. Thank you for watching.